So in this ShowMe, we're going to look at the three different types of funding or provision which we need to know about for our specification. As you can see, they are the private, public and voluntary sectors, or ways in which funding is provided for people to participate in sport. And we're going to look at each of these in turn, and we'll start off by looking at the private sector. So if we start looking at the private sector or private funding, remember this is to do with opportunities to participate in physical activity. Private funding usually is characterised by the fact that the organisation is business, and therefore its main priority is to make money, to make a profit. And if you make a note of either of those 2 points in an answer about the private sector, private funding, then you probably score marks. Other characteristics are that the private sector tends to have a higher level of equipment, a higher level of service. You tend to have the facilities are better than the public sector, and you have more knowledgeable, usually more knowledgeable staff who are there to help and assist. By definition, because it's more expensive, it tends to be more exclusive. Exclusive meaning that it's not available to everybody, because of the very nature of the fact that it's expensive to join these clubs, and therefore not everyone can do that. And often the private sector and private funding tends to be one sport. So an example I'm thinking of might be a tennis club or a golf club, which is exclusive. An example of tennis may be something like David Lloyd's tennis centres. So there's our view of the private sector, private funding. 4 or 5 different points there. If you can make 3 or 4 of those different points, then you're well on your way to scoring marks about the characteristics of private provision for leisure. Okay, so if we move on, we look at the public sector now and how that provides opportunities for taking part in physical activity and leisure. You'll see there the first point is that in comparison to the private sector, the public sector tends to be cheaper, and therefore it's not as exclusive and becomes much more affordable. You don't necessarily have to have a private membership to join, to go to a local leisure centre, for example. You can pay as you go to go swimming for the one-off occasion. Public facilities tend to be less high standard, equipment tends to be less high standard. It's a bit of a generalisation, but we might make a point saying that facilities do not tend to be as good in the public sector as the private sector. Really key point here is that it is funded, or they are funded, the public sector is funded by the local authority. If you say the local government, you'll probably be okay. Please don't say government itself, you won't score a mark for that, but local authority is really important. That's what's going to score you a mark. Money comes from the local authority to fund the public sector. And the last point there you can see is that these facilities tend to be multi-sport facilities, i.e. there may be a swimming pool, there may be a sports hall for badminton, there may be aerobics, there may be a weights room, etc., rather than being specifically one sports oriented. So the voluntary sector then really is talking about providing opportunities for sports clubs. I'm thinking about perhaps single sports, sometimes multiple sports clubs, but if we look at, as an example, as being the local hockey club, the voluntary sector may be funds come into that hockey club through membership fees, through players paying a match subscription after every match, and they tend to be run, the clubs tend to be run by club members, and they will do a number of fundraising activities, so for example quiz nights, party nights, etc., to raise money, and that money goes back into the club, and it's usually not for profit. Now the reason for these types of clubs to exist, twofold really: to increase grassroots participation, i.e. mass participation at the bottom level, the introduction level of the sport, but also to encourage the development of sport and also excellence where appropriate.